As humans, we tend to perceive the length of our life purely as the number of years we spend on Earth. It seems logical to think that if we live, let's say, 80 years, then we experience the exact same amount of time. But we rarely ever consider how these 80 years actually feel from the perspective of the person experiencing them. It could be argued that the number of years defining our lifespan is the time in which we are available to other people, rather than the time we actually live through from our perspective. Therefore, in this video, we will explore the subjective side of the ever-passing time and look into how we perceive it. You will be surprised by how short life actually is when you look at it with your own eyes. We will also provide you with a visual representation. Starting with the most obvious and least subjective matter, an average person spends 1/3 of their life sleeping. With an average global lifespan of about 75 years, sleep alone takes up about 25 years of an average person's time on this earth. While it can be argued that by any reasonable measure, a sleeping person is very much alive, the time we spend sleeping does not add to our conscious experience. Besides some short experiences of dreams, there is no difference between living for 75 years and spending 25 of them asleep and living for 50 years fully. This is already a huge factor shortening our lives, but another phenomenon, which is familiar to all of us, but seldom reflected upon, we often notice how time appears to speed up as we age. Think about how long the time you spend in kindergarten seems compared to last year. This effect goes a little differently for every person, and there are many factors causing it, not all of which are currently understood by the world of science. But one thing we know for sure is that the effect is universal and seems to amplify with age. It is impossible to state how many years of our lives are subtracted or added due to this effect, as a year is an arbitrary measure of time. But it is possible to estimate at what age you've lived through a certain percentage of your perceived lifespan.
For example, it would seem that if you were to live for 75 years, you would reach the perceptual midpoint of your life at 37.5 years old. However, due to the acceleration of time, this is not the case. It is not possible to accurately calculate the share of your life that has passed at any given age, but some rough estimates can be made. One such estimate can be based on a study published by Cambridge University Press in 2019. The study provides a graph showing the estimated rate at which time is thought to speed up with age. We analyzed the data from the study and calculated that by the time you turn 21 years old, you have already lived through half of your lived experience. This is assuming that you live the global average lifespan of 75 years. Also, according to this data, by the time you turn about 38 years old, half of your lifespan, you will have lived through 74% of your perceived life. These data seem very shocking, and although it is impossible to calculate such things with precision, they can serve as a great reminder of a value of time. The most important thing to understand is that our perception of time is largely based on our memory, looking back at how long ago something happened, therefore allowing us to make estimations on how much time we would have to experience in order to get to a certain place in the future. Yet this isn't the end, since our memories are also influenced by our feelings and associations we make with past events. Thus, we need to take into account how many new experiences and emotions each stage of human's life brings. For starters, we generally cannot remember the first 3 years of our lives, which is already a big chunk of our lives. After that point, to really appreciate how little we remember, we have to get into the details. For instance, to remember what were you doing on the 27th of May 2023? How about the 11th of April 2024? And what about 2nd of June 2025? Most of you probably don't know what you were doing on either of these dates, nor do we. These dates are completely erased from our conscious experience, and therefore it could be argued that they cannot be counted as a legitimate part of our lives. Think about how many days have gone missing like that throughout your life, probably a vast majority of them. It is impossible to count how much of an average person's life goes forgotten. The case is made harder by the fact that most of our memories we cannot assign to a certain date. Moreover, we can often recall something that we had forgotten about for years, and many of our memories are distorted or outright false. All things considered, our lives are much shorter than they seem, and with the fading memory, it appears that they barely stretch beyond the present moment. Thank you for your attention.